Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know, because we're well into our 24th year, during our half-hour shows I interview poets about their craft, what they're working on now, what they've done in the past, what they might be planning for the future. I also talk to other kinds of artists who are maybe writers of journalism or novelists, maybe even sculptors or actors, musicians, or people involved in the creative life of fashion. It's a very, very wide net. So if you've got an idea for a guest who might be right for the Writer's Block, please watch for our address at the end of the show, and we'd be glad to see your suggestions. I also want to mention we're very proud here on Cape Ann of our productions, especially the long record of the Writer's Block. This is a product of the cable community effort, and you can't get this on Dish. Remember that. Tonight, I'm very proud to say we have somebody representing the fashion world, a fashionista by the name of Lisa Griffiths, a.k.a. Victoriana Lady Lisa, who has written a wonderful book we will show you many times during the half hour called International Steampunk Fashions by Victoriana Lady Lisa. Lisa Griffiths is from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and went to Pittston area high school there, and also, I'm very fond to say, as a community college teacher, the Luzerne County Community College there. She now lives in Rockport and has been there for a couple of years, and I want to close with these item facts by the fact that she was named by the New York Examiner the Steampunk Cult Figure of the Year as a result of her appearance on the Oddities program on the Science Channel. We're going to find out more how science and fashion fused. Now, before we meet Lisa, I'm going to read just a couple sentences from the flyleaf of the book, International Steampunk Fashions. Climb into your steam-powered time machine aircraft for a tour of the fashion world, steampunk style. This fashion backward collection features hundreds of intricate, creative, and visionary steampunk designs from top names in the business and fans from around the world. Presented in high-quality fashion photography, the looks in this compendium include head-to-toe Victorian style coupled with futuristic sci-fi concepts, as well as hats, jewelry, and other accessories. Lisa, welcome to the Writer's Block.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming down.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
And thanks very much for coming dressed as a steampunk fashionista.
Of course.
We rarely get people who are so dressed up for the show, but I might start doing this more often. It's very, very nice. I'm going to hold up the book, and I'd like you to tell me, as my very first question, how's the glare there? Is that all right? Is that okay? Mm-hmm. What is steampunk?
Steampunk is a blend of the Victorian era aesthetic meets science fiction fantasy. If you could imagine the Industrial Revolution meets the future. Steampunk started back in the late 1980s as a literary movement. Prior to that, there was a cyberpunk movement, which was a literary genre for science fiction future books. And there was a gentleman by the name of K.W. Jeter, who was a science fiction writer, who was trying to come up with a term to describe his science fiction books that were set in the past, not the future. And he came up with this term, steampunk, as opposed to cyberpunk. And what that refers to is the steam refers to the Industrial Revolution and the Victorian roots, and punk is your individual style that you put to it.
So that's, in one word, the 19th century and the late 20th century combined.
Yes, think of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, and Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Many of the writers today base their works on those two great writers.
So you're wearing today Victorian fashion melded with, well, the microphone's 21st century, so that's
yes,
futuristic.
That's perfect.
Is there anything else that's futuristic combined with your Victorian fashion
Yes,
tonight?
I have a combination of reproduction steampunk fashions and also authentic pieces. My hat is an authentic piece as well as the feather, and my hat pin, which incidentally can also be used as a weapon
Ooh.
if necessary, as you never know when you're going to have to fend off the bad guys. I also have my time portal here. Now it looks like just an ordinary pocket watch, but when you move the hands around the dial, there's a special code that can take me back in time into the 19th century. And when I get tired of the modern day chaos, I want to escape to the 19th century. So I use my time portal and I go back.
Wait till the show's over. We want to keep you here for the whole half hour.
Okay.
Can you show us that pin again? That's a scary looking device there.
Oh, my hat pin.
The hat pin.
Yes.
That's what, 9
Victorian
inches long?
ladies kept hat pins in their hair so that their hat wouldn't blow off. But certainly it did come in handy because the lady did have to protect herself.
They were used as weapons or recommended to be
They
used?
could be used as weapons, absolutely.
The combination of the future and the past is one of the items that I noticed in many of the wonderful photographs in the book. And I want to hold up one of a gentleman in a lot of Victorian metal standing next to a computer screen.
Yes.
I want to make sure we give full scope to the beautiful photography, beautiful color photography in this large book. I'm not sure, 11 and a half by
10.
8 inches. Nice tabletop kind of book with every page full of gorgeous pictures. Here's it's like a flat screen computer, and this gentleman seems to know all about computers, although he's living in the 1870s, sort of. When did you get the idea for this book? Or I should first say, where did you get involved? Or when did you get involved in steampunk fashion? And then segue to how you got involved in the production of this book.
Okay. Well, how I got involved in steampunk fashion, because I'm a Victorian era historian, I've always enjoyed the Victorian era and its fashion. I'm currently working on a book called The Fashionable Victorians and Edwardians with Schiffer. That was my first book. It has a steampunk chapter. And I began to get so many wonderful pictures from all over the world, submissions for the steampunk chapter, that the chapter literally outgrew the book. So I asked my editor if I could go and do a single book on steampunk fashion, and they said okay, and that's how International Steampunk Fashions was born, out of the original book.
So this passed the original book.
This
which is
passed
gonna
the
come out
original
later.
book, yes, which will come out later.
So one of your future projects that I wanted to ask you about is the past project.
Exactly, exactly.
What will the title of that book be?
The Fashionable Victorians and Edwardians.
And do you have any other projects?
I have some unrelated book projects that we can talk about.
But on fashion?
No, just this. Just the Victorian and Edwardian and the steampunk.
And when did you begin to expand that original chapter into this book?
2 years ago.
So it's a 2-year process.
Yes.
This came out in spring of
March 31st of this year.
March 31st
Yes.
of 2013.
But it was 2 years in the making. Yeah.
Gathering the photographs.
Absolutely. From all over the world, from LiveJournal, Facebook, MySpace, private websites, everywhere.
Maybe we'll show a couple more pictures.
Oh, certainly.
And you could describe what we're looking at. I have, well, here, this is a fellow with a metallic sort of top hat on.
Yes.
I'm referring to this picture here on my right, on the viewer's left. Can you describe what we're looking at here?
That's from France, and this gentleman is an inventor, and he's dressed in some of the typical steampunk style that the gentlemen wear. You can see that he has some kind of gadget in his hand, so that could be something for the future. He could be making something.
Little metallic gadgets are important, aren't they?
Yes, gears, things that have to do with pocket watches, anything mechanical will fit in well with steampunk.
Okay, let me pick another one out here. There are many pictures of Victorian ladies who might get kicked out of Victorian England.
Right.
Here is one of them. Can you describe this picture for us, please?
Well, that's the interesting thing about steampunk versus the traditional Victorian era. Corsets are now worn on the outside in steampunk. That would have never been acceptable in the 19th century. That's one of the fashion statements, and it's extremely popular. Also, you notice she has goggles on. Goggles are another accessory that are very popular in the steampunk
They're up
genre.
here above her on her forehead.
Yes, yes.
Above her forehead.
Right.
Was this an authentic corset or made to authentic specifications?
That looks like a reproduction. And there are some beautiful, beautiful designers that are doing great work today.
Are they as cruel as they were said to have been?
No, if you have your corset fitted correctly for you, it's not uncomfortable. If it's made right and fitted for you, it's not uncomfortable.
You don't have to be cinched up until you...
Well, you do, but it depends how tightly you want to cinch it. You can do it and still breathe.
Now, some of the portraits in here are sort of comical. This fellow looks like sort of a cartoon character almost. Can you describe this picture?
Well, he's an adventurer, and he has some pirate aspects to his look. And he's also futuristic. He has different types of gadgets, and it depends on the person. You have to ask them, tell me about your accessories, because each thing means something to that individual person.
This is a good segue to your outfit tonight. I'd like to go back to that. Now, you mentioned the time device.
Yes, my time
and
portal.
You mentioned the pin. Can you describe for us what else you're wearing, the fabrics and the colors for the male and female fashion fans out there?
Well, steampunk is all about accessorizing. And a lot of the Victorian patterns, I have a paisley jacket on, which is very popular. They use a lot of ruffles, and again, going back to the Victorian and the Edwardian era.
So, excuse me, the paisley was popular back then? Victorian and
Oh, yes, yes.
So that's where in the 60s, mod stuff borrowed
It did.
paisley
Yes,
as well.
it did. Right, that's correct.
Okay. I didn't know, I was always associated with the 60s and not with, a further jump back 80 or 90 years.
Yes.
I'm sorry, so go ahead there.
No, that's quite all right. There are different themes in steampunk, but prevailing is the Victorian era. You can dress as an explorer. Some of the gentlemen will dress as explorers or inventors, or maybe a mad scientist look. Anything goes, really.
And tell us about your skirt and your
I'm
purse.
more traditional. I'm more of the traditional Victorian Edwardian fashion, where I have the traditional long black skirt, and I have the lace-up boots that were popular in that era.
This is a floor-length skirt?
Yes, it's a floor-length skirt. Yes, exactly.
Okay, if you pull your skirt up, can we see the boots? I don't know if we can show that. Can you see
That's as much as a lady can show.
So we wouldn't want you to be improper. But these are high boots.
These are high boots. They are a reproduction because the originals are very difficult to get your feet into. They're extremely narrow. I own several pair, but the Victorian women had very tiny feet as well as tiny waists.
Yeah, and a lot of pain. And can you describe the purse that you have on? And also, you have some cameos?
Yes, I have a lovely purse that someone made, and many of the steampunk accessories are made. In fact, a lot of them are fabricated. There are wonderful designers and artisans in my book that you will see their great work. I put these on to the purse because I like the cameo. It's very reminiscent of the Victorian era. But you will find gears and dials, feathers. There's just so much that can be done with this fashion genre. And my book, I've really tried to really show the various ways that people can accessorize and build a steampunk wardrobe from the bottom up.
I imagine most of this would have to be newly fabricated because antiques would be valuable and frail and probably not numerous enough to feed the steampunk market.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's where the designers come in and the purveyors. At the back of my book is a chapter where people can go onto the internet and search out all types of artisans, purveyors, photographers, designers, models, with the steampunk look that's found in that book.
We have mentioned your website on our screens, put up super. Would you
Yes.
tell us about your website and just for the fun of it, name the address?
The website is victorianalady.com.
victorianalady.com.
Yes.
And that is one of the many, well, I won't hold up the page because it's simply a list of print names, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens of steampunk clothing and accessory sources with their email, not email, with their websites. And these are, I know because I looked up a couple of them, are all over the planet.
Yes,
It's not
this is just the
United
tip of the
States.
iceberg. This is really a phenomenon that's international. It's a literary phenomenon. Fashion is just one part of it. It consists of art and film, the literature, music, design. It's just incredible, and it's really just starting to go mainstream.
We talked just before the show about whether this is rising or plateauing or ebbing, and it's just taking off.
It's
say.
rising.
What can we expect from
Yes,
steampunk
yes.
world?
Well, there's a program in the production right now called Lantern City by Bruce Bloxleitner. He's producing this, and one of the major networks is going to carry it, and it's going to be a weekly steampunk-themed program. So people are really going to get a good taste when that comes out. There are wonderful magazines out there. One of my favorites is called The Ladies of Steampunk. It's a magazine that features the steampunk fashions and the models among their pages. And there are several movies that have been out. I know a lot of people are familiar with the Sherlock Holmes movie with Robert Downey Jr. Hugo was another example of a steampunk movie, and a couple of years ago, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. That's a perfect steampunk movie to watch.
Hugo takes place in France, and the Holmes movies, of course, are British, as is the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Is steampunk fundamentally British or European, with America being sort of adjunctive to it?
I have to say yes, you're on the right track, because again, the steam refers to the Industrial Revolution and the Victorian Edwardian era. So we do have to go back to Britain for that, because Queen Victoria set the stage for the Victorian era.
Gave us the name. Gave us the name.
Yes, she did.
Where is this book available?
You can get.
I'll mention the title again. Where is International Steampunk Fashions available?
It is available in any of your local bookstores. Go in and ask for it if it's not on the shelf. It's available online, and I also can provide signed copies. If people are interested, they can go to my website, victorianalady.com, scroll to the bottom of the first page, and my email address is there. If they contact me, I would be delighted to put that book on their bookshelf.
Now, you mentioned, and we spoke briefly before the show started, do you have other projects?
Yes.
And I promised to ask you about those other, and I think you're eager to tell me about
I
them.
am.
You're excited
I am.
about them.
Yeah, this
Tell
is
me what else is going on.
This has been a long coming dream for me, because I have a hobby of baking and cooking, and I love to do that. I have a business called That Nutty Redhead, and of course that goes along with my natural long red hair.
That's your real red hair.
That's my real red hair. I've been growing it for
all 3 feet
11
of it.
years. Yes. The business That Nutty Redhead is offering gourmet and frosted Bavarian nuts, delicious nuts that are gluten-free. There's one, a spicy sweet nut, which is one of my favorites, called the Hug Nut. And of course you probably have heard of the Bavarian frosted nuts. Those are those delicious cinnamon, sugary, sweet nuts that almonds and pecans and cashews that you just can't get enough of.
Yeah. And you're going to...
I'm working on that. I offer various flavors. I'm working on some other flavors. And it's cashews, pecans, and almonds.
So the whole book is nuts.
Well, the business, the product is nuts,
the
yes.
product is nuts.
And I plan to have a cookbook in the future, which will be recipes that will be incorporating these particular nut blends, the gourmet nut blends.
Does this tie into Victorian England at all?
Actually, it does. One of the popular Victorian candy snacks was called burnt almonds. Now, of course, if we called it burnt almonds today, no one would buy any, but really it's the frosted Bavarian nut that's so popular in Europe right now, and and in America in places.
So the origins of some of these nut recipes are from the same
Absolutely.
same period.
They are from the Victorian era, yes. Everything I do has Victorian roots. It's just in my blood.
You mentioned earlier that you are a Victorian historian.
Yes.
I hate to rhyme like that, but
Yes.
it's kind of unavoidable. How did you get interested in Queen Victoria's period from
1837 to 1901.
1901?
Yeah, it was her reign. Interestingly enough, I started very, very young. I was in grade school, in 5th grade, and my great-grandmother showed me a picture of my ancestor, Samuel Martin, who was a quartermaster sergeant in the Union Army in the Civil War. And I was fascinated
Your
with that
great-grandfather,
history.
you said?
Yes, my great-grandfather was in the Civil War, and I was fascinated with the history. I began to ask her questions about him, and I really liked the clothing he was wearing, so I asked her if she had any other family photos. Well, out came the box, and we spent the entire afternoon looking through 19th century pictures, and I was fascinated. The next day I went to the library and I took out every book I could find about the Victorian era, Queen Victoria, the Civil War, and I've never stopped researching. When I was 15 years old, I went to my first estate sale. I bought a beaded handbag and a pair of lace gloves, and I was hooked. It's become a sickness, I tell people, and I've been collecting ever since. I have a Victorian and an Edwardian traveling museum. For the past decade, I've been lecturing all over the East Coast as Victoriana Lady, and it's my passion. I love it. And from that led me into steampunk about 3 years ago.
A 15-year-old with a passion for estate sales.
Yes.
I like that idea.
Oh, you couldn't
Still-
drag me out.
You still have.
I
a
still
passion
love
for
it.
estate-
I still
estate
do.
stores and
I love the history. It's such a privilege for me to be able to be a part of preserving history. And with the steampunk genre, kind of have the beauty of both worlds.
I've just gotten from Nick our 3-minute signal, so I'm going to begin to close off. It's been a very delightful, quick half hour. I'm going to show the book again.
Thank you.
International Steampunk Fashions by Victoriana Lady Lisa, aka Lisa Griffiths, our guest this evening. You've seen her real name on the screen in a super, and you've seen her website, and you've seen her in person in costume in Victorian, well, not Victorian, steampunk. Steampunk
Yes,
fashion.
steampunk style.
Thank you very much for coming down, Lisa.
Thank you so much.
It's
This
been
was
a delight.
this was
We've had a
wonderful.
couple of fashion shows, but not often. We should do it maybe a little more often because we've gotten good response from them. So thanks very much for coming down.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank all our people in television land for watching the Writer's Block this evening. If you've learned something about steampunk fashion and what feeds it, Victorian history and Victorian fashion and science fiction, then the Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.